Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Happy Rotary Monday. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Cindy Peterson, President-elect, filling in for our President, Tony Knorr. Any Yotes fans in the room? What? That was really, really fun. And the Jackrabbits, they did okay too this weekend? Yeah. Awfully proud to be a part of South Dakota on a day like today. Glad to have all of you with us. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing as I invite Brian Mulder to do our invocation.
Thanks. Will you pray with me? Lord, we pray today in line with our topic of conversation, and we pray for your peace and protection over those who have experienced a natural disaster or those who are currently experiencing one. Please grant them peace and protection amidst the storm. Use your voice to calm the wind and the waves like when you calm the raging storm at sea. We also pray for the relief efforts in those areas which have experienced a natural disaster. May community organizations, churches, and government leaders use their resources to provide for those in need and comfort those who have lost much. May people see the light and hope of your love from those who seek to help. We rest in the comfort of knowing you have a wonderful plan for our lives, and no natural disaster's power can even come close to matching the power of you through people who rise together, serve those in need, and rebuild communities. Thank you for this food. Bless it unto us, and thank you for this conversation. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
We have some guests with us today, and though we don't have time to introduce each and every guest, I would like to invite our guests and those who invited them to stand and be recognized as part of our day. I'd like to welcome our junior Rotarians, Olivia Versteg from Jefferson, John Costello from O'Gorman, and Jonathan Skelton from Roosevelt. We will hear from John and Jonathan in just a moment. I'd like to invite Kayla Ekstrom up to introduce today's junior Rotarian presenters.
All right, while these two are making their way up here, I want to start by introducing John Costello from O'Gorman. John is involved in student council as the treasurer. He's a student ambassador, and you may have seen him this weekend as the co-captain of the varsity basketball team for O'Gorman. Congratulations, John. He was actually named all-tournament team as well. In addition to all of that, he finds time to volunteer at the banquet and St. Mary Church. He's also an Eagle Scout and has part-time jobs at Hy-Vee and Fuddruckers. He is planning to attend the U.S. Air Force Academy to become an Air Force pilot or a Space Force officer. So please help me in welcoming John Costello.
Today, I would like to talk about resilience in the face of failure. As Nelson Mandela once said, I never lose. I either win or learn. This past weekend, the boys basketball Class AA tournament was held here in Sioux Falls at the Denny Sanford Premier Center. There, I competed as a member of the O'Gorman boys basketball team. From winning with a buzzer beater in overtime of the semifinal game against Washington to losing in overtime to Roosevelt in the championship game, there was certainly a roller coaster of emotion throughout the weekend. While we did not win it all, we ended the year 21-3. Only losing to Roosevelt. In those 3 games we were defeated, we lost by a combined total of 9 points. As our emotions of sadness were expressed on the court and in the locker room after our championship game lost, it reaffirmed my belief that athletics is so much more about learning about hard work, determination, accountability, and teamwork than it is about wins and losses. Even though we did not win it all, as a team, we learned and grew as one, just as Nelson Mandela said. This past summer, I also had the opportunity to attend South Dakota Boys State. There, I learned more about how our local and state governments function and ran for a variety of offices, including governor. I learned how to garner support from people with differing political beliefs, agendas, and ideologies. And while I did receive the Federalist Party nomination for governor, I ultimately lost in the general election to my opposing nationalist candidate. However, this was not the end of my story. Earlier in the week, during Boys State, a past Boys Nation delegate spoke about the opportunity to attend Boys Nation, one of the most prestigious bodies in the US for high school students. Listening to him speak, I thought to myself, why not me? Later that week, I was interviewed and then selected to be part of the South Dakota delegation to Boys Nation. I felt honored to be one of only 100 boys in the country to attend Boys Nation in Washington, D.C. When I arrived in Washington, D.C., determined not to let my loss in the governor's election affect my confidence in running for office at Boys Nation, I ran for Secretary of the Senate, the fourth highest position at Boys Nation. Unfortunately, once again, after multiple rounds of voting, despite my hard work, I lost by only one vote. I was gutted. That night, my counselor for my section shared with me the quote that I began my speech with. I never lose. I either win or learn. After he shared this, I took a step back and reflected on the valuable lessons I learned about myself from my losses at both Boys State and Boys Nation. The experience made me reflect on who I am as a person, and it has shown me that I hold my values higher than my aspirations. Furthermore, I do not back down in the face of adversity, nor change my beliefs when pressured to do so. It has made me realize that this is the person I am and always will be. In times of defeat, you have to see the lessons in front of you and not just focus on your failures.
I'm a little bit shorter than John, so I gotta move this down. Okay, our next junior Rotarian is from Roosevelt, so we have quite the lineup today. Johnny Skelton is here with us. Johnny is involved in student council, DECA, debate, golf, and 3 different national honor societies, including science and Spanish. He plans to major in economics and computer science, to be a software engineer, and he's got a list of impressive finalists for his college of choice. So please help me welcome Johnny.
So I'd like to start out by saying, as the self-proclaimed biggest Roosevelt boys basketball cheerleader in the student section, it was a tough loss this week, or it's a good win for us, tough loss for you guys. But no, great game. At the end of the day, John is one of the best, has the most sportsmanship out of any player I've ever seen. So I just, you played great. But actually what I came to talk to you guys about is debate. So I have a list of activities, but debate is probably the one I'm best at, I'd say. So I've been on the Roosevelt debate team since my freshman year. And through middle school, I had one specific group of friends, and I wouldn't say they were bad influences, but I definitely was not as motivated or was not as focused on academics through middle school. And so freshman year, I took debate 1, as a lot of freshmen do, because as a course requirement. And I stayed after school one day to take a test, and there was a debate team practice. And I just kind of got to talking with these people and talking about, or I finished my test and I got to talking to these people about debate, and it was kind of interesting. And so I found myself showing up the next day after school and the next day, and I just kind of it wasn't like I officially joined the team, but I kind of just ended up joining the team. So fast forward to junior year, my partner and I earned a silver bid to the Tournament of Champions, which is the top 200 teams in the nation. And then we also qualified for nationals. So South Dakota sends four teams to nationals to represent them. So my partner and I, my junior year, got sent to nationals. And then my senior year, we are going to nationals in World Schools, which is a different forum. And then we got a bid to the Gold Tournament of Champions, which was the top 100 teams in the nation. So the way my form of debate works is we pick a new topic every month. And so last February, our topic was actually the benefits and harms of Turkey's participation in NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And if you're not familiar with the geography of Turkey, it's right in the midst of the Russia-Ukraine war, right? They're like the main deterrent for NATO. So it's not often does a debate topic get talked about outside of debate. We often get into really niche topics, and I get like 80 hours of research on very random things. But it's super cool now with all that's going on in the geopolitical atmosphere that like all of you know about Turkey and Ukraine, and especially last week with Dusty Johnson coming in and mainly focusing on that. It's super cool to see everyone learn about a thing I've been studying for months, and then I can actually like use some of this knowledge I've gotten from debate. So there's three main ways debate has impacted me. The first is obviously intellectually. When you put in 80 hours of research a month on a specific topic, you get really like, you'd be surprised how much I know about urbanization in West Africa, and like what the kind of weapons Turkey has in their like factories. Like I don't even know when I'll ever like use this stuff, but it's like sometimes in class something will come up and like, Johnny, why do you know so much about this? Like that's kind of strange. But the next thing is socially also. Like I said, in middle school, I kind of had one specific group that I was in, and when you join debate, you meet a lot of people that are really different from who you would originally have met. So I would say these people also impacted me directionally because these people were like super driven and super smart, and it's the reason I applied to like it's the reason why I have to choose between colleges like U Chicago and Duke and UNL right now, and it's the reason why. I mean, I don't want to brag about myself too much, but it's the reason why I have been like motivated through high school in academics. So I would guess what I've taken from debate is I've not been scared to branch out anymore, not afraid of any like labels and how people might think of you, because a lot of times those things just exist in our head. And the other thing is debate has just really helped me in speaking and creativity, thinking on the spot, and thinking critically. Thank you.
Aren't our junior Rotarians an inspiring part of our meeting and our day? And for me, I know for my week. So thank you both, and thank you for all our junior Rotarians. We have a new member induction. I would like to invite Stephen Williamson to introduce our newest member.
Fellow Rotarians, my name is Stephen Williamson, and I would like to introduce my coworker and friend, Marcella Prokop, to Rotary today. She is the Director of Access and Workforce Opportunity at Southeast Technical College. Originally from Hay Springs, Nebraska, like Angie Kuiper. And if you don't know where Hay Springs is at, it's just a little north of Car Hatch. She graduated from Augustana College with a degree in journalism, and she has a Master's of Arts in creative writing from Chatham University. Now, you might think that Marcella is only one of those super cool English literature, English teacher types, but she's a lot more than that. She's part owner of an organic farm, which is just located on the other side of the border in Minnesota. In fact, they just finished tapping their maple trees, and if you really like maple syrup, they have it. She also harvests honey from her bees, and then they also have organic fruits and vegetables. But last but not least, she's also owns property here in Sioux Falls and manages them. So there's a lot to Marcella Prokop. Please give a warm welcome, Downtown Rotary welcome to our newest member, Marcel Prokop.
Hello, fellow Rotarians. Thanks so much for welcoming me. Thank you, Stephen, for the introduction. Thanks, Angie, for greeting me at the door. It's never again going to happen where I'm in a group with a large group of people and somebody knows where Hay Springs is at. So I really appreciated that. Stephen was really generous in saying that I might be thought of as one of those kind of cool English teachers or creative writing teachers. I feel like in the time that I have been at Southeast Tech since July, Stephen has done a lot as the ally working with me to try and promote discussions around access to higher education and what does inclusion look like and what does equity look like for students who have potential to go to Southeast Tech, but maybe don't really know how to walk that path or how to start that journey. The word cool kid or the phrase cool kid is something that is humbling to me, but also feels a little bit impressive. Growing up in Hay Springs as the daughter of an immigrant and a older father, my dad was 50 when I was born, I didn't do a lot of the same things that my peers were doing. My mom wasn't aware of some of the systems and some of the trends and cultural things in my rural community. And my dad, quite frankly, wasn't interested in raising another child and doing things in the way that some of my friends' dads did. So I didn't often feel like I fit in. When I got to college, I sort of found a place for myself with writing at Augustana. And I found a place for myself here in the community of Sioux Falls. This has been my home off and on for 20 years or more. So I'm really excited to be a part of Rotary today because of a few things. Rotary International is a phrase that is important to me. Knowing what's going on in the world outside of Sioux Falls, outside of South Dakota, outside of our borders, knowing that there are over 300 different chapters and different countries that are participating in Rotary is something that aligns with my personal and professional values. When I began teaching at Killeen Community College 12 years ago, I worked with immigrants, I worked with first-generation students, and trying to serve folks whose stories differed from my own was always really inspirational to me. Today, in the work that I'm doing at Southeast Tech, I'm also trying to foster discussions and support for some of those same demographics of student. I want to help the community understand about how to lift others up through networking. So that first objective of Rotary, the idea that through acquaintance, there's opportunities for service and giving back and building each other up. It's really something I'm trying to do at Southeast Tech. And then the idea that mentorship has become a really important component of the work that Downtown Rotary is doing in conjunction with Sioux 52. As an instructor, I am always a mentor. I'm not just there to teach my students about how to write a thesis statement or how to come up with a creative ending on a paper, but I'm there to mentor them and help them grow using my own experiences. And I believe that's something that Sioux 52 is doing, and that's something that every member here at Downtown Rotary is working on doing as the city grows to expand its mentorship opportunities. As I come to meetings, as I get to know all of you, I look forward to discussing that and any ideas that you have and learning more about how you contribute to this organization and to our city. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Marcella. And now I'd like to invite Jack Marsh up to induct our second Rotarian today. Jack.
Thank you, Cindy. It's my privilege to introduce to you Jennifer Tysinger, Executive Director of the South Dakota Symphony Orchestra, which is the premier arts organization in our state. Jennifer has been with us for a little over 3 years, and when she came here, we certainly knew that there were going to be challenges, but we never imagined the challenges that would be presented by a worldwide pandemic. I'm a member of the board of directors of the South Dakota Symphony, and we have several of my fellow directors are in this room. We see how the sausage is made, and I can attest to you that Jennifer Tysinger has provided outstanding leadership with the South Dakota Symphony Orchestra. We are in our 100th season, and in many ways, our organization is as strong as it has been for the past century. The South Dakota Symphony Orchestra is nationally recognized for its innovation, for its relevancy, for its community engagement, for its work in bringing together cultures through music, and certainly through its world-class musical performances. Jennifer has had 25 years in both administrative and executive roles with performing arts organizations, including executive director positions at the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra, the Sun Valley Summer Symphony, and most recently the Bravo Vale Music Festival. She has a bachelor's degree from the University of North Texas and a master's from Rice University. She is a native of the state of California, and South Dakota is the 9th state that Jennifer has lived in. She and her husband, Chris Gribke, are the parents to two very talented teenage daughters, Sonnet and Sage. Please welcome the newest member of Sioux Falls Downtown Rotary, Jennifer Tysinger.
As I was standing here listening to Jack, I was thinking, how many new Rotarians, Jack, have you introduced? I'm like, and I feel like I'm in a long line of privileged people who have been introduced by you to Downtown Rotary. It's a privilege to be a part of this esteemed group of people. I have been a guest at these luncheons over the last 3 years. A guest of Sandra Christensen, of Jane Gullickson, of Lauren Cheddar, of Jack Marsh, of Scott Lawrence. Sandra Pay's here today. Various members of the South Dakota Symphony have been saying to me for several years, it's about time that you join Downtown Rotary. And after meeting so many of you over these last few years, I realized that honestly, I want to be part of your club. And to be able to join this network of people, to get to know you and how you impact this community will help me in my leadership role at the South Dakota Symphony as we bring more music out off the main stage and into the community through our various engagement programs and our education programs in the schools. So I'm delighted to be, a part of this great group here and to help to support the wonderful work that Downtown Rotary does for this community. Thank you so much.
Welcome both Jennifer and Marcella. While we take a quick photo, I would like to invite our presenters, our program presenters, John and John, to join us on stage. While they settle in, I'll tell you a little bit about our guest, Mayor Don Barnett. Don Barnett served as mayor of Rapid City from 1971 to 1975 when disaster and civil unrest threatened to tear the city apart. First elected at the age of 29 after returning from serving in Vietnam, Don later ran for the United States Senate in 1978 and went on to a career in real estate development and cable television, serving 57 towns in 7 states. Don was also vice president and national marketing director for a firm that provided financing, design, and construction for 20 municipal golf courses. He is the author of 2 books, Thorns and Roses, a firsthand account of the years as mayor, and I Fled, a fictional account of a young boy struggling with a stuttering problem based on his own experiences. A 2011 inductee of the South Dakota Hall of Fame, now making his home in Littleton, Colorado, please welcome Mayor Don Barnett.
Thank you.
President-elect Cindy and fellow Rotarians, I'm John Pullman from Lawrence and Shelley, by the way. It is a real honor to have Mayor Don Barnett with us today. He is a member of the South Dakota Hall of Fame for a reason. He is a witness to history. More than that, he was a very active participant in one of the most significant episodes of history in our state's long existence, the Rapid City Flood, which was the deadliest natural disaster ever to occur in our state. 238 people lost their lives, 1,500 homes were destroyed, millions of dollars of damage occurred, and Mayor Don, as I said, was a very active participant and a leader in every sense of the word during that time. When the flood and the civil unrest were happening, he wasn't holed up in a bunker somewhere. He wasn't in an observation tower. He was boots on the ground. He was in the water helping to pull people out of the flood. When the civil unrest was happening in Rapid City with the Russell Means and Nettis Banks and the American Indian Movement, he was there negotiating with them, working with the citizens of his city face to face, making things happen. And it's an amazing life that he has led, and that episode of his life is captured in the book Thorns and Roses that Cindy talked about. He shares it first person. This was just written last year. It's a recounting of his time as mayor from 1971 to 1973. We'll be talking a lot about the episodes from this book today. Yeah, it's an excellent book. I've read it myself. Unlike Larry King, I actually read the books of the authors that I interview. And this is an incredible book. If you visit with Rick or Don afterwards, there are tickets that have a website so that you can order it yourself. If you want to come and buy the book directly and have the mayor sign it, you can come to Lawrence and Schiller tonight at 6 o'clock. We're going to be having an encore presentation of this. We have about an hour and a half, so I'll be able to ask a lot more questions. And we'll be able to take a lot more questions from the audience as well. So know that will be available. But Rick will have cards, and you'll be able to order right off of that. If there's anybody you know that would have liked to be here and wasn't able to, send them to Lawrence and Schiller tonight. And like I said, we'll be able to do this again. We'll start with the book. The book is a very detailed account of your time as mayor, probably the most comprehensive collection of stories about the Rapid City flood. Could you walk through the process of how you were able to put together such a detailed recounting of what happened?
Well, thank you, John, and fellow Rotarians. When I left public life, I lived in a small city in Wyoming called Riverton, and the first thing we did when I got there is form a Rotary Club. It still is active and has 50 members in a town of about 9,000, and it was an honor to be a Rotarian then, and it's an honor for me to be here today. Whenever I get called back to Rapid City, and they normally do it at 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, up to the 50th anniversary of the flood, a lot of my dear friends, they say, Don, nobody has ever written the definitive history of the flood, and you're going to pass away someday, and you're the only one that probably has a thorough understanding of the nuts and bolts, the tragedy, the sadness, the recovery, the optimistic attitude of those historical moments in South Dakota history. So I started to write the book about 5 years ago, and I got 1,000 copies from the morgue in the Rapid City Journal of articles that related to the flood. I arranged those by month. I then used my noggin and my memory and outlined it. And then we got to thinking about, after I found a publisher, what would be a good name for the book. Well, many years ago, Abraham Lincoln is credited with saying the following things. We can complain because rose bushes have thorns, or we can rejoice that thorn bushes have roses. And ladies and gentlemen, that is so profound. This book is filled with nasty, terrible, painful thorns that would stop a city in its tracks. But it's also filled with roses. and positive achievements by the victims of this disaster and the survivors who did not have self-pity. They took a big bite into the future, and they decided that they would be survivors. They were not filled with self-pity. And the best part of this book is about the roses that happened in our city during the recovery.
Let's go right to the flood. June 9th, 1972. Walk us through what happened that day once the rain started to fall.
Well, the flood happened, and it was lucky for me. I had to find the bathrooms in City Hall the first year, and I was awfully young. In fact, my opponent said I was too damn young to be mayor of Rapid City, but I did win with a victory margin of 168 votes. Some of my opponents called me Landslide Barnett, but it was a very intensive campaign. And the first year I ran on the platform, we would build a civic center with a sporting arena that would be bigger than Sioux Falls, and convention facilities, and a fine arts center that would seat about 2,000. We did the taxes. It was referred to a vote, and we won that by 63.8%. And then my administrative assistant, the great lady who has trained 22 mayors of Rapid City, she came in my desk, into my office, and said, "Don, Rapid City is like a rocket on the launch pad. Everything's going to take off now. We will finally be able to hold the State A and the State B basketball tournaments in Rapid City." The West River people were excited. And then I got invited on the morning of June 9th. This is not fiction. Some of the churches and lawyers and counseling services sponsored on the morning of the flood a death and dying seminar. They brought in national experts. How would a community handle a disaster with a high magnitude of death and injury, millions of dollars of tax base down the drain? And they had national speakers. I stayed for all of it that morning. I played golf in the afternoon, but about 4 o'clock, we noticed the clouds were assembling. I went to the YMCA with my wife and my daughters and a friend, and a policeman saw my car parked out front, and he came in there. He said, "Mayor, you've got to go to your office. There's about 10 or 15 important life or death emergency calls there. We've had to call in all 3 fire department shifts, and all of the shifts in the police department, the Weather Bureau is saying we will have extremely high water." I sent my wife and kids home. I went to City Hall. I started returning the calls, and this is how it happened. The commercial airline pilots reported to the Weather Bureau in Rapid City that the clouds were gigantic. They were filled with a high density of water, but there were not any clouds and wind flying over any place in the Black Hills. Then the pilots from Ellsworth Air Force Base called their tower, and the tower called the Weather Bureau saying, "Something really bad is about to happen. If we don't get some wind at these elevations all over the Black Hills, those clouds are going to drip dry in the various canyons that lead into Rapid Creek." About 7 o'clock, it really started raining. I traveled the city. I tried to get a perspective of it, but the problem was the Weather Bureau in Sioux City controlled the degree of the warnings that the local airport could issue. That's just how the federal bureaucracy worked. So I could not scream bloody murder over the radio without breaking federal procedures. Well, I drove to the city, and then about 9:30, I was out by Canyon Lake, and we could sense it was an ungodly rain, and I made the call. Well, big deal, Mayor. Guess what? By the time I put out the warning, 80% of the city had lost its power. You couldn't watch television or listen to a radio, so the people in the residential neighborhoods were only given the most modest type of warning And then after I was on the radio for about 8 or 10 minutes, the entire city lost its power. John, that's how the damn thing started.
Now, I alluded to once it happened, you were an active part of the rescue teams that were out in the city trying to save people, going to the neighborhoods where Rapid Creek was rushing through. Describe that experience and what that was like.
Well, a life-saving moment happened. After I made the warning, I headed down by the creek so we could put out the warning, and there was a white van at this intersection, and some guys were standing there, and I stopped and turned the flashlight on. The police chief was with me, and these guys said, we're from the air base, and we were told to come to town and find somebody in authority because we want to help all night. Well, I laid the law down. I said, young man, I was a captain in Vietnam. I know exactly what I'm doing. You belong to me for the rest of the night. They said, yes, sir, let's get started. So we went down by the creek. We had a few life jackets and many, many coils of rope, and we began the rescue process. About an hour and a half later, we found our way to a gigantic mobile home park. Ladies and gentlemen, because of bad land planning and bad zoning, and some of that happened under my watch, this mobile home park was flooding, and the water was so high and so outrageous that it was tearing the mobile homes off their foundations. And so I drove up there, and a fireman was there with about 6 other firemen and 3 trucks, and he saw me. He said, Mayor, you want to take over? I said, absolutely not. You're doing a good job. Treat me like a private. And I've got 11 men from the Air Force, and we went to work, and it was just amazing. This lieutenant, about 23 years old, took all the ladders off the fire trucks, and we had barrels and barrels of rope, and we tied these ladders together until we got about 100 feet. I think the longest one was probably being here in the back wall, and I was up there in the lead, and this lieutenant was in charge, and we'd knock on the door of these mobile homes. I had one child here, one child there, and the airmen had 22 children, and then we'd lead the mother and the father out of their mobile home. We'd walk back up the street. The neighbors were there to take the survivors, and we did that until 5 o'clock in the morning. I am not a hero. That lieutenant had leadership skills. You would not believe he didn't even raise his voice. He said, fellas, let's get the green mobile home now. And boy, we lined up with that elongated ladder, and that gave us stability so we wouldn't be falling down. And it was held together by about a mile of rope. And then we pulled people out of the water until about 5 o'clock in the morning. Well, I received some radio messages on the police radio in my car, and I told that lieutenant, you keep these 11 men. I have got to find some other people, because I knew by then from the police radio that a nursing home had been totally lost. It was empty, and it had held about 80 senior citizens. We worked our way over there finally, and one policeman and a couple of attendants and a couple of nurses had led over 80 people out of that nursing home across Mountain View, and they put them into a gas station. But the water was so powerful, they were terrified that there would be an implosion. And then these 80 people inside the gas station would be inundated with ice cold water. Well, it didn't take long to figure that out. There was another rehabilitation hospital about a block and a half away. And this lieutenant in the police department took charge before I got there, and he led every one of those people to safety in a secondary hospital. So we did that all night long and all night long. And by the next morning, we knew it was a horrendously complex and difficult flood, and the body search became the key element of the day. And by the end of the second day, we'd found about 150 bodies, and there were 4,000 names on the computerized missing list. That's how it started.
Now, unlike most floods where the water just rises over the banks and gets into homes, this was a raging flood. This was the Canyon Lake Dam had broken and the water was rushing down through Rapid Creek, which was populated by mobile home parks and low-income housing. Describe what happened when that water got to that area.
Well, Canyon Lake had been built in the 1920s as an earthen dam without engineering standards, without compaction standards, and about an hour and a half into the flood, the water came tumbling over the dam. It came in from the bottom, and all of a sudden the dam fell apart, and the water then cascaded into the city. There were arguments and discussions. Was that the wall of water? We don't think there was a wall of water. I was in the water about half a mile below Canyon Lake, and the water was up to my thighs, and then all of a sudden the water was up to my shoulders. But it didn't come like a cascading, roaring, crashing water. The water just got a hell of a lot deeper, a lot faster. And then that water spread out, and before long, Canyon Lake was empty. But I always said more people perished on the morning of the 10th than on the evening of the 9th, because about 2:30 in the morning was the highest recorded floodwaters. And the next morning, we had agony on our hand because the city's water treatment plant had been totally inundated, and we could not provide potable water. The water superintendent said we got about 8 million gallons in the reservoirs. We won't be able to purify the water for 1 week or maybe 2. That terrified me because I'd been in Vietnam and had been a hospital administrator. And if we did not get pure water without pathogenic bacteria, Rapid City would have had 2 disasters. One based on flood damage, death, and destruction of property, and the other would have been a serious secondary health issue that would have brought Rapid City again to our knees. But that civil servant, I get so outraged by this potassium that's in the conversations. Everything about government is bad. Everything about government is not bad. Those civil servants fixed the water treatment plant. We had pure water to sell 6 days after the flood. They flew in pumps and parts and truckloads from Denver and Minneapolis. And the National Guard let us use some of their planes. The Air Force used some of their planes. And our crews worked day and night. And we were down to less than 1 million of gallons to serve water to Ellsworth and Rapid City. And I had taken some precautions and was ready to order from plants in Denver and Minneapolis 350,000 cases of bottled water per day for as long as we needed them. I made the call to Denver, and the federal people told us, we'll pay for that water. You make the decision where you need it. So we waited 1 more day. Mr. Wessel and his crew got the water plant cooking. Little by little, 2 million gallons on hand, 3 million gallons on hand, and we never had that secondary health issue. And I pinned medals on Don Wessel and his water crew for the next 2 years. He's the man that saved Rapid City from a second disaster.
Talk a little bit about what it took when that water purification facility was hit. There were like tons and tons of debris and mud that went in there, and it took dive teams going around the clock to clean that out, just so that you could get to the point where you could start
We had to have
fixing it.
divers. The water treatment plant has several levels of treatment, but the bottom 3 levels were filled with gravel, muddy water, parts of trees. And as these things were sucked in to the water treatment plant, all of those intake pumps burned up. They didn't catch fire. They just stopped working. And then we didn't have a source of pure water. And the first man that we called to help us was a man that many of you know. General Dwayne Duke Corning was the commanding officer of the South Dakota National Guard. I called him before dawn, told him what the problem was, and he said, I'll send a crew of 50 with a couple of engineers, a lot of heavy-duty equipment, and we'll clean out that intake system. And I said, that's wonderful. And they arrived within 30 minutes, and they began sending people in here, pulling out logs and debris and everything so that we could get those various levels of the water treatment plant cleaned up. But we still need, because they were filled with water too. So we put every volunteer fireman that we could into the water treatment plant. But then I had another idea, and I called out to the air base because I knew they had a diving club there. And I talked to the base commander. He said, we got about 22 members in the Ellsworth Diving Club. I said, sir, I was a captain, and he was a colonel. I knew that much. And he said, yes, sir. Don, how can I help you? I said, send every one of the divers that you have. And he said, we've got Grand Forks, Minnesota, or North Dakota. We've got Malmstrom Air Base up in Montana. We've got the one in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and there's 2 or 3 in North Dakota. I'll call those other bases and have them get together, all the divers they can find, and we'll send a big plane and pick them all up. And by 5 o'clock this afternoon, we'll have you 40 or 50 more divers. You don't know what music to your ears is, because Don Wessel said we can't repair the water plant until we get the damn thing cleaned out. And it was just millions and millions of tons of debris in there. And then some school miners were on the verge of graduation, and we hired about 40 of them to be manual labor, and they couldn't get underwater, but they could crawl in there with hip waders on and pull all that debris out. And the flood was on Friday night, and we were manufacturing pure water by the following Thursday morning. And I had a sigh of relief. I called all those water bottling companies and said, hang on, we got to run a few batches through the plant. We might need you tomorrow. And they all said, we're ready. We got truckers and convoys, and we'll send 350,000 cases of water a day. And then I was able to cancel that order because we were then producing potable water.
What a story. The pandemic has really shined a light on the difficulty of getting things done with members of opposing political parties during an emergency. You mentioned a little bit about government can be good. Now you had a mix. The president was a Republican, the governor was a Democrat, your common council was a mix of Republicans and Democrats. How difficult was it for you in 1972 to get things done and get the dollars and the aid where it needed to be working with the government agencies?
John, I don't remember it as being entirely complex. I was no fan of President Nixon. I am what they say in Rapid City, a damn Democrat. And that's not hyphenated, that's one word, if you know what I mean. But I was able to win by that 162 votes. And so I will say this, and I'd be quoted, and I'm glad it's in the book because nobody wrote it down. President Nixon's appointees in the 16 federal agencies that work out of a high-rise building in Denver were some of the most talented, wonderful civil servants I've ever worked with. And they came up and taught us to speak the language of the federal government. And before long, we were forgetting about Democrats and Republicans. McGovern came by to look at the terrible wreckage, but he had to give a speech in Madison, Wisconsin that night, and he didn't become president, but Nixon did. And some of my Democrats were madder than the devil at me, but I told them we cannot fault President Nixon because he's doing a good job. And then we came with the federal aid. But there's one thing we missed, John. I got to throw it in there. On the Sunday night, after the Friday night flood, we got the council together, but the media and the reporters weren't there yet. And so I didn't call the meeting to order. And we had a federal official there from FEMA, or the equivalent of FEMA. And he said, I need authority from the council to repair the mobile home parks on the banks of Rapid Creek. And we will repair the pads, and the FEMA is going to send 1,000 new mobile homes and park them at the air base. And when you have the pads ready, we'll tow them in, and the survivors will then have at least a permanent, safe, dry, warm place to stay for 2 or 3 years. Well, that turned out to be a life-saving adventure. But all of a sudden, the public works directors, we sat there as a team, and that's the rest of my remarks, with the most wonderful, magnificent city council in America. You would not believe the caliber of those people. Brilliant, willing to listen, willing to compromise. And the public works directors, write this down. He said we should never again sentence the survivors to one more night on the suicidal floodplain. We should never sentence the survivors to one more night on the suicidal floodplain. And we'd never heard such wisdom in Rapid City. Wasn't for me. It was from a civil engineer that had graduated from South Dakota State. And the president of the city council said, his name was Leonard Swanson. He said, Swanee's right. I move we do not repair the mobile home parks. Little debate, a vote. 10 people on the council voted no, not to repair the mobile home parks. Folks, that was on the Sunday night after the flood. Give me my book. That was the first rose. The first rose was, we're not going to be stupid enough to go back on both banks of Rapid Creek and rebuild Rapid City. And then people said, yeah, we can make a park out of it. It'll be 5 miles long and 5 blocks wide, and we'll recreate in it. We'll have hiking trails and biking trails and soccer fields and everything under the sun, dog parks. And all of a sudden, we began to sell them that concept of rebuilding. And what that was the triggering mechanism then during the summer. HUD granted us a $48 million urban renewal program. We purchased and relocated the lands where 700 mobile homes had been located and where another 1,100 regular homes were located. Most of those were damaged far too much to ever be lived in. And during the next 4 years, we relocated 1,500 families from the low, dangerous, suicidal floodplain in Rapid City. And did that ever start a building boom? We had developers from Sioux Falls that came out to all of a sudden take a look at the demand for housing. And then Congress did something even more remarkable. They provided 1 year, 30% loans at 1% rate of interest. And the Jones family, if they owed $40,000 on the home that went down the drain, and the bankers were just terrified, all the bankers would go bankrupt because they had unsecured loans. There was no value left there. Maybe half a foundation, half a driveway. The house was totally gone. And so they could take that debt of $40,000. It might cost $55,000 to build another house. And SBA right out of Sioux Falls, you sent your civil servants, and they would combine those issues, and they would then get a 1% 30-year term loan. The $45,000 was probably a 6% on 20 years. Come on, bankers, are you getting what's happening here? That meant that these survivors did not have to take bankruptcy, and it wouldn't drive Rapid City into the doldrums for 25 years to financially recover from the flood. But I got to tell you, about 10 days after the flood, I'm sorry, Johnny, got this. About 10 days after the flood, Mike Shermer called me. Everybody remember him? Mike was a great mayor. He was mayor when you built the Sioux Falls Arena. And Mike and I had become friends. By the way, he was a damn Democrat too. But anyway, the long and short of it, he called me. He said, Don, you will not believe the magnitude of the money that we're collecting to help Rapid City. He said, here it is, about 8 days after the flood. I've got about 100,000, but I haven't counted all of it. One of the banks is the trustees. We're sending the kids to every neighborhood of Sioux Falls with butternut coffee cans. And I'm hitting some fat cats, some bankers who can write some checks. And he said, I think I'm going to have maybe $110,000. I said, Mr. Mayor, would you drive out tomorrow morning and meet with the city council in Rapid City at 1 o'clock tomorrow and bring your money? He said, I'd be happy to. And he arrived. We were almost in tears. And he stood there and handed me a certifiable check for over $104,000. But by that time, we had formed the Rapid City Area Disaster Foundation, and people from all over South Dakota, every state in the nation, and 17 foreign countries sent donations. And by the 4th of July, we had $1,400,000 in the disaster account. We had a board of directors made up of labor union executives and a wide variety of all the interest groups in town. And then we gave that money away on the 23rd of December. By that time, we were out of money. We had made 5 distributions. These people had lost everything. They did not have a toothbrush. They did not have a change of clean underwear. They were broke. They lost 5,000 cars had been totally destroyed in the flood. And so we hit these charities. The Red Cross came to town, wrote checks for $2 million. The Salvation Army came to town from St. Louis with their national disaster team. And the commander told me, Mayor, during the first 6 days, we fed 27,000 meals. We let them use the old city auditorium, and then they kept that open till December, feeding the people that didn't have the old proverbial pot, if you know what I'm trying to say there. And those people then had a sense of optimism about their own recovery. And then the Federals provided those SBA loans, and we were on the way to survive.
We have time for questions, Cindy, from the audience. Okay. I've got 6 pages of questions here that there's no way that I'm going to be able to get to. That's why we're having the session tonight, too, so that we can do that. Because he's so difficult to extract information from. You know? I've asked like 3 questions all this whole time. But any of you, if you've got a question for the mayor, now's your chance. And again, you can't come to Lawrence and Chili tonight at 6, and we'll have more time for Q&A.
What happened with the dogs, cats, deer, and did they survive? Was there any priority to help them?
We did find pets, kitty cats and dogs. The deer took care of themselves. We asked that question. Did any of the deer drown? And I'd never got a report about that. People would just cut down the fences and let the horses run away, but they were mostly gathered up later on. That was never a real emotional issue for a lot of people, but I had a lot of people stop me on the street, and then we built a brand new animal pond, and that was for the safe care and loving of pets that did survive. I'm sure there were casualties. My goodness, people left their home carrying their baby, helping their wife. We had a group of 40 homes. Everybody got on the roof. And I was across the street with a megaphone, and I said, now hang on to your chimneys. We can't get over there with ropes and boats. And we had spotlights, and they were crawling up on the chimney and getting on the top of the house and hugging their chimney. And a lot of those people survived.
Other questions? One more question. Back.
First of all, I want to thank you very much. I'm one of the survivors of that flood. I'm also one that lived through that trailer court that you talked about several times. And so my recollections of those days is shock and awe. And things that you maybe didn't mention is that most of the problems was because it was dark. Like you said, communications were out. We as a population had no idea what the heck was going on. And that one of those people you sent into the trailer court to warn us warned me. And when he came up to the door, it was water probably about 4 inches up. By the time he tried to convince us to leave our place, it was up to my knees, and by the time I drove my car out, which I just barely got out, it was up to my thigh. And so anyway, thank you very much. I remember all the support from all the people in Rapid City, everybody helping out. I equals meals, I drink that water. Thank you very much.
Well, we're not going to end on any stronger. No, I mean, this is a mic drop.
John, she said final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Oh, Mayor.
Well, a lot of fiction comes out of a disaster. I always felt terrible. I was the guy giving the press releases, and this is so important for you to understand. One man did not save Rapid City. But I will tell you what happened. That city council were so miraculously bright and honest. We would sit down with a complex bunch of problems, and we would hammer them out, all 10 of us. I was part of the debate, and then we would agree. The secretary would write that up, and then we'd change it a little until we had a firm policy on issue A. And then we would vote on it, and it would be 10-0, and I would tell the clerk, please register my vote as yes. We did that about 160 times during the summer, where we would hammer out the policy, but we never had a pouting minority. You know what I mean by that? 8 of us said yes, and 2 people pouted and went to the newspaper and called us all rotten criminals, and we were stealing all the federal money. That did not happen. The cohesive brightness and brilliance of the council was to try to convince the people that we were not the village idiots. We were listening to people. We scheduled 22 separate meetings in elementary schools and junior high and the one high school, and people came up with wisdom, and we wrote that down. And I want you to know that without the wisdom from the people, we probably could not have survived as best we did. I always say this, when everybody thinks alike, nobody thinks at all. You know what I mean by that? We weren't a bunch of rubber stamp mamby-pambies for me. The council had brightness and smarts, and we would hammer out the policy, and then of course the mayor was challenged to exercise on that and get the job done. But it was a community-wide recovery. Made me very nervous that I was getting a lot of credit for this, but I tried to be bold and clear with the media, and then we crawled back to salvation and crawled back to even having a more beautiful town. The tax base was restored to its original condition within 2 years. We added about 1,000 new homes in Rapid City during the first 4 years after the flood. Well, now that might not be a big deal in Sioux Falls, but it was a big deal in Rapid City. And little by little, we recovered. We passed out those donations, and it was a team effort. Don't tell your grandchildren that the mayor of Rapid City was the hero. I was doing my job. Somebody had to be mayor, and the leadership of that city council set records for the people of South Dakota.
Rick Melmer, John Paulson, thank you so much for bringing Don to share his story with us. Don, thank you for evoking all of our senses in your storytelling. I enjoyed it thoroughly. And what a wonderful way to start our day and to start our week. Next Monday, March 28th, Sanford Underground Research Facility will be here to talk about what they do and what that looks like. April 4th and April 11th, join us to hear from our at-large city council candidates. Thank you for sharing a few extra minutes with Rotary today. Rotary is adjourned.